Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for being here tonight at the Casa Italiana Zerilli-Marimò at NYU for this special event organized by the AIRIcerca New York chapter in collaboration with Kairos Italy Theater in celebration of the World Water Day. My name is Pietro Mazzara, and it's truly a pleasure to open this tonight event, Adele's Daisy, and a theatrical reading on climate change written by Marco Vignudelli. Tonight, it's a bit special because it brings together something we don't always see in the same room, science and theater. As scientists, we usually communicate with graphs, with data, a long paper that more often than not only other scientists read. Tonight we are trying something different. Instead of showing you chart and climate models, we will tell a story. Adele's Daisy takes us to the year of 2055 in the Po River Delta in Italy, a place where water has become scarce, rationed, and even privatized. In this future, people struggle to survive in a dry and difficult landscape. And some become what the story calls water thieves. People simply try to access a resource that was once abundant. Now, this is a fictional story, but unfortunately, the science behind it is not. The script was developed with the support of climate scientists Sergio Castellari and Carlo Cacciamanni, and it reflects scenarios that scientists have been discussing for years. But the goal of this story is not to scare us. What this story tries to do is connect scientific understanding with emotional awareness, helping us to imagine what those scientific predictions might actually feel like in people's everyday lives. And of course, tonight his theme is water, which is probably the most fundamental resource we have on this planet. We use it for agriculture, ecosystems, cities, and most of us, we are very interested in water for coffee, so we should be very, very interested in water sustainability. But joke aside, water is already becoming a critical issue in many regions of the world, in which climate changes is altering rainfall pattern, intensifying drought, and putting pressure on water systems that millions of people depend on. That is why the World Water Day exists, is to remind us that access to water, something that we often take for granted, is actually one of the most important challenges of our century. Tonight, we will explore that theme, not through a lecture, but through the power of storytelling and performance. In a moment, we will hear the theatrical reading performed by Caparrotti and Sonia Villani from Kairos Italy Theater, accompanied by Matteo Rini with music and Melis Guardiola-Bijur providing voice. After the reading, we will continue the conversation with a discussion panel, and we are honored to have with us Sergio Castellari, a climate scientist at INGV, who has contributed directly to the scientific foundation of this work. Michela Biasutti, from Columbia University, whose research focuses on climate variability and its social impact, and Caparrotti, artistic director of Kairos Italy Theater, who brings the story to life on stage. The discussion will be moderated by Alessandro Melis from the New York Institute of Technology. And very important, because no good Italian event ends without food, please stay with us after the panel for an aperitif and pizza generously offered by the Casa Italiana, which will give us all a chance to continue this conversation in a more informal way. Before we begin, I will thank all the organizations and people who made tonight possible: AIRIcerca, Kairos Italy Theater, Casa Italiana, our speaker and performance, and all of you for being here. So thank you. These events like these remind us that conversation about science and the future of our planet don't belong only in laboratories or academic journals. They belong in communities, in culture, and sometimes, like tonight, on stages. So I invite you to listen, imagine, and reflect on the world that Adele's Daisies present. Thank you all of you for being here, and now I give the mic to Laura.
Just a reminder, I don't have much voice today, so I will act with a lot of intentions. You'll see. Just turn off your cellular phone or silent your cellular phone. And what else? I think Pietro said it all. And I want to thank Pietro because it's his first time to do something like that. It's the first time with AIRIcerca, so he's new. And so, can we give a round of applause for Pietro because he really, we are artists, it's easy to talk to people, but it's not for everyone, it's easy. So I think we are all ready. Should we keep the door open or yes, if people enters? Yeah, maybe someone can stay at the door. Yes, thank you. And welcome to Casa Italiana. I feel like I'm the boss tonight. And that's it. We are ready. We can go. Yes. You're okay? Okay. So then we can start. Adele's Daisy. If it hadn't been for the benefits he had experienced on the previous night, he would never agree to have his body covered with that strange mixture of greasy fat. Even though the thin fibers of the wetsuit protected him from the direct contact with his skin, Alfredo didn't like the coating of lubricant. Maybe it was the unique way Ruzzati spread it over him that made him nervous. Tonino had already cleared the dirt from the entrance hole. He fastened the elastic belt around Alfredo's waist, the belt that was attached to the end of a long rubber tube. On the left side of his waist, a small pouch with a few tools hung like a holster of a coat. Alfredo put on the mask that covered his nose and mouth. He had to take about 10 breaths before getting used to breathing through the fabric filter. It was so hot. He adjusted the goggles to be tight against his cheekbones. Through the lenses, he looked at the faces of Tonino and Ruzzati, who smiled at him. He caught a sign of anxiety on their faces. He lay down and began to move forward through the excavation, pushing with his elbows. For the first few meters, the night light cast a long shadow ahead of him, along the narrow burrow carved into the dry belly of that abandoned land. A few pushes with his forearms made the shadow dissolve into an indistinct compact darkness. Alfredo closed and opened his eyes, but couldn't detect the slightest shade within the blackness surrounding him. He switched on the lamp and saw nothing but a dusty fog.
He leaned his face toward the rear view mirror. He moved his jaw a few times to correct the reflected image. He stepped out of the car, around the early morning heat. Gabriele Moretti walked up the moving ramp toward the airport terminal. The asphalt ribbons of the runaways lay down across the sterile ground, embroidered by a web of cracks carved by drought. He saw her. She was sitting in front of the check-in counters, talking to an elderly woman. Good morning, doctor. I'm here. Miss De Parolis turned around with an amused smile that faded as she looked at Moretti. Fonseca will pick you up tonight and you'll join the anti-sabotage team. Here is the report with the details of what will concern you. Moretti waited a few seconds. Dr. De Parolis turned back and resumed her conversation, ignoring him. That round face, sturdy body dressed in ordinary clothes, belonged to the president of the Pirtet Water Fund, the most important European investment fund in the water treatment sector. Dr. De Parolis had understood before anyone else that because of the ongoing climate change, speculation would fall upon water itself, triggering conflicts and radically influencing the markets.
The greasy layer trapped some of the dust, allowing Alfredo to move forward with less friction. Dust. Alfredo hated it. It scourged the environment, making the torrid summer seasons even more unbearable. The consequences of water scarcity also spread into quality of the air. They were breathing. He had never grown used to living with that opaque blanket covering the city. 23 minutes had passed. He planted his elbows and pushed his feet hard against the soil. He felt his heartbeat rise, yet he increased his pace to challenge the fatigue in his muscles. Tonino and Ruzzati watched the thin, transparent tube. It was swallowed into the opening of the tunnel. That strange mouth seemed to suck at it like a strand of spaghetti. 2 meters of tubing were left to reach the point where Alfredo would have to connect it. Suddenly, the cannula was sucked rapidly and definitely inside the crater, as if the spaghetti has leaped free from a tangle of matriciana. "We are there!" exclaimed Ruzzati. "Yes, yes, we are there!" repeated Tonino.
Gabriele Moretti placed the tools into his bag one by one. Welding powders, vulcanizing glues, a laser, and the wedges he would use to stop leaks. He opened the trunk of Fonseca's car, put the equipment inside, and took refuge from the unbearable heat in the back seat. They reached the checkpoint surrounded by fire breaks, walls, built to contain the frequent fires in the outer districts. From the city center toward the outskirts, these protective belts multiplied, along with the urban decay. Green areas thinned out until they disappeared, replaced by depressing clusters of apartment blocks. Electricity and water were rationed according to entitlement quotas established by local administrations, minimum allowances on which people had to build their survival. Anyone who used their share of air conditioning in 3 or 4 hours had no energy left for the rest of the day. It was true that additional kilowatt recharges could be purchased, but they were sold at outrageous prices by private companies or trafficked in underground circuits like doses for drug addicts. The car's tinted windows screened the light and his mood. Fortunately, at that hour in the afternoon, they avoided the processions of workers returning from the industrial districts. Only darkness would allow them to go back to the hives where they lived without risking collapse from excessive heat.
Alfredo reached the rough surface of the pipe with his fingertips. The cone of light illuminated the black tube where water flowed. Water. He had studied every detail of that hydraulic system. Diameter, flow rate, maximum pressure. His obsessive attention to detail helped him contain the fear of being discovered by the anti-sabotage squads. He pulled the drill from his holster and began eroding the plastic mass. Some hot shavings struck Alfredo's hands, stinging like burns, and the fumes from the overheated plastic made breathing difficult. He wouldn't be able to hold on much longer. He blew into the hole to clear it and began drilling again with much determination. The tip tore through the last membrane and plunged into the pipe. Tonino, on the other end of the tube, sat waiting, looking toward the cluster of buildings a few hundred meters away. Tiny glimmers came from the silhouettes of the apartments. Fireflies created by the cigarettes of sleepless tenants. Ruzzati instead kept his eyes fixed on the tunnel entrance. He leaned his head toward the tube's opening. First, a timid gargle, then a first irregular spurt of water. He did it, Tonino! He did it! 2, then 3 spurts of liquid spill from the cannula, forming small dark stains on the ground. Ruzzati held the tube downward to help the flow, but the stream stopped. They tried to come down and stood perfectly still and silent, worried that their excitement had frightened the water away. Instead, the stream resumed, clear and determined. Its interruptions growing shorter and shorter until it became a thin but steady squirt. To them, it sounded like the roar of a mighty waterfall.
Was led into a room where he met the operational team. A heavy-set man, Colonel Petrini, moved his hands through the air as if conducting an invisible score. From a distance, he traced colored lines on a transparent screen and highlighted sections of territory on an electronic map with fluorescent circles. On his neck was a patch of reddish skin, scarred from a burn. These are the areas where we've identified suspected sabotage. The zones in red indicate sectors where the pipelines have registered a drop in flow. He pointed toward the left corner of the screen, enlarging the selected terrain. We'll start tonight. We'll tackle all these targets in sequence. Before removing the illegal diversions from our company's pipeline, we'll shut off the water flow. At that point, you'll take your position and wait. I want to capture every bastard responsible for these sabotages. Colonel Petrini and Moretti sat at the bar counter. Petrini's excessive size overflowed the circumference of the stool. He looked like a cap of a mushroom on a thin stem. Couldn't you have the police intervene? Asked Moretti. Moretti, the police don't want to dirty their hands with tramps who steal water from millionaire companies. Public opinion would explode if the state intervened against these people. They prefer to leave this job to us. I saw that the targets are concentrated in the Romagna area. Yes, that's right. These pipelines were built along the Po's margins. The sea has risen half a meter in the last 40 years, Moretti, while the river has almost halved its flow. You're young, but when I was a boy, I spent my vacations on the Riviera. Petrini leaned back against the counter, balancing somewhat awkwardly. From Ravenna to Cattolica, there were dozens and dozens of kilometers of beaches and tourist resorts. The countryside irrigated by the Po made the region fertile and rich with crops. But when the wedge of salt water pushed up from the sea, irrigation was no longer possible. So over the years, everything turned into the desert you see today. But for our De Parolis, where there's desert, there's business. Isn't that how the saying goes?
Alfredo was giving up. The inclined stretch he was tackling backward had become a steep climb. He retreated by contracting his abdominal muscles, like a strange earthworm, hunching his body and then stretching it to inch backward. In that unnatural way, gaining centimeters by centimeters with efforts, he finally freed himself from the earth's grip. When he sensed the faint reflection of the light, he tore the mask from his face, pushed himself forward a bit more, and collapsed. A modest trickle of water was enough to revive him. Tonino turned Alfredo's face into a grotesque mask by tracing lines through the dust with a thin string. Alfredo, you are amazing! You are amazing! Ruzzati hopped around like a shaman dancing before a fetish. Cut it out. Help me up. Come on. We have to hurry. They quickly gathered everything around them and reached the carcass of an old abandoned tractor. It looked like the skeleton of an ancient animal. Time had consumed the materials, leaving a grim structure of rusted iron. Behind them, two crumbling walls gave no hint of the barn they once belonged to. Tonino guided the tube along the metal profile of the rear wheel, passed it beneath the seat, and reached the tank. Alfredo opened the cut they had made in the metal, took the cannula, and inserted it into a 12-liter container. Now, open the valve again. And that's enough for today. Tomorrow night, it will be full.
11:30 p.m. 2 men camouflaged into the ground. 3 others hid behind the remains of the old ruin. The men on the ground listened to the sound of their own breathing amplified by the silence. Moretti was waiting about 200 meters away. He felt nervous. The days were becoming longer and more exhausting. This was the 7th operation, and he was beginning to feel a strange discomfort and uneasiness. He wanted to go home. For more than 20 years, he had specialized in repairing pipelines, and he never wanted to know what happened before his interventions. But the barrier of indifference behind which he sheltered himself was becoming thinner and thinner. He thought about the Parolis and about what Colonel Petrini had told him. Her father, a famous climatologist, had devoted his life to spreading awareness about the risks for the planet. Umberto de Parolis, a pragmatic man, not burdened by ideological dogma, had foreseen what would happen. But the politicians and administrators did nothing. They limited themselves to sponsoring initiatives and showing interest only and if, when elections made the subject attractive for gathering votes.
Grandfather Ruzzati's farmhouse stood facing State Road 495 between Porto Maggiore and Ostellato. Tonino and Alfredo had been waiting for Ruzzati for over 30 minutes. Inside the shed, all the tools for work in the field were still there. The farming lineage of his ancestors stretched back many generations, and Ruzzati felt guilty for having abandoned the family land. From 2035 to 2040, a series of extreme climate events had whipped out his attempts to keep cultivating it. Sudden, violent rains flooded the fields in spring, and then scorched summers burned the crops before they could be harvested. Brackish river waters in what remained of the Po Delta Park, and a fire in June 2041 broke him for good. As they waited, Tonino packed empty bottles into his backpack. For 2 weeks now, they had been leaving the farmhouse, reaching the tractor carcass in the dead of the night, and siphoning the contents of a tank into 6 2-liter bottles. They returned to their families with 4 liters of water each, doubling the ration granted by the municipality. Tonino, come on, let's go. We can stay here until dawn. We'll leave his barrel in the stable. You'll see, he just overslept. Alfredo didn't wait for a reply. He grabbed his backpack and hopped on his bicycle. The road from the farmhouse to the water point followed the embankment of a wide ditch that once drained excess water from the pond. Alfredo, you know what happened this morning? Tonino was biking faster to catch up. He bloomed. My daughter's flower bloomed. Alfredo slowed down, just enough to ride beside him. Adele kept saving a bit of water to water a daisy seed she got at school. Alfredo sketched a smile. In the evenings, when I get home, I water the pot without her knowing. And this morning, Alfredo, this morning, the flower bloomed. You should have seen her face.
The contingent's stakeout included a pair of men positioned about 100 meters away. All of them, including Moretti, were in contact through earpieces. They wore infrared goggles that allowed them to see anything moving in the dark.
Alfredo and Tonino reached the first of 3 bends leading to the abandoned tractor. In the silence of the night, they could hear the friction of their tires against the dust covering the asphalt. It sounded like the faint sizzle of frying. Coming out of the final curve, they stopped pedaling and let inertia carry them forward. They left their bicycle in a ditch and silently moved toward their source.
Careful. Here we are. Gabriele Moretti heard the words fade before losing the signal. The two men lying on the ground watched them pass just over 15 meters away. From the groove where they were hiding, they could observe without being seen, ready to take them from behind. The other three waited a few seconds until the targets were within firing range. The squad leader decided to wait until they reached the water pipe. He wanted to strike them as they began to drink. It would hurt more. One of the men behind the wall tracked their silhouettes through his weapon's sight. His focus in the binocular caused a slight imbalance, and his boot crushed a dry thorn. It sounded like stepping on a bag of chips.
Alfredo and Tonino were stunned. The tank inside of the old tractor was empty. Not a single drop came from the pipe. They bent down, bracing against an incomprehensible threat. A strange noise made them lunge forward toward what remained of the engine to hide.
Beams of light flared simultaneously from the helmets, projecting a sequence of blinding circles like ovals in a bizarre theatrical choreography. The unsuspecting actors froze in that explosion of light. They were subdued before they could even think of reacting. Of the four saboteurs, only a woman managed to grab a tank, slipping from the grip of one of Petrini's mercenaries. She began screaming at the top of her lungs. Her cries alarmed Moretti. He left his hiding place and ran, hindered by his tool bag. The dry ground gave way under his feet whenever he failed to avoid the widest cracks. He reached the illuminated area and saw her being dragged violently by the militia. She clung to the plastic container with both hands, still pouring water into her mouth. Even as they forced her toward the vehicle that was going to detain them, one of the men slapped her so hard he broke her lip. "What are you doing? Why are you treating the woman like this? She was just drinking." "Moretti, what are you doing here? You know you're supposed to wait for our signal." A young man stepped in front of him, blocking his view. Moving lights slipped around his silhouette, creating a glowing halo. "Focus on fixing the leaks and let us do our job." The man could have been his son's age. "Don't be fooled, Moretti. These bastards resell water on the black market. They exploit the most desperate people. They make money off misery, believe me." Moretti watched the woman being taken away. Thirsty and wounded, she still looked like nothing more than desperate.
"Hey, what are you doing? It's me." Ruzzati's figure became recognizable as he approached. "You idiot! You scared the hell out of us. Where were you?" "I got to the farmhouse early and I wanted to trick you. I already emptied the tank. Here, these are your bottles." "Have you lost your mind, Raz? You call that a joke?" Ruzzati sat on the ground, leaned his back against the tractor frame, stretched his legs, and lined up the water bottles beside him. "Sit down for a minute. We're not in a hurry, right?" The two friends remained standing near the engine, surprised. "Come on, let's make a toast. Guys, we deserve a sip, don't you think? We spent a month digging the hole." Alfredo bent his knees, looked at Ruzzati's face in the dark, and saw how tired he was. He let himself drop to the ground. "He's right, Tonino. Let's drink some of our damn water." Ruzzati opened a bottle and brought it to his lips. Gulping nervously for a few seconds before passing it to Tonino. "Guys, this tastes awful." Tonino drank more slowly before handing it to Alfredo. No, it's not bad. It's still nice and cool. What a miserable life, Tonino. We are still in barrel of water. Can you believe it? We don't even have the right to survive. We have to steal it. They fell silent. For a moment, that felt endless. Then Alfredo picked up the barrel again. You know what? Let's go for another round. Come on. And you, Tonino. Tell him about Adele's Daisy.
Well done, Moretti. Excellent work. Preparing those leaks so quickly is truly professional. Colonel Petrini wore mirrored sunglasses with a gold metal frame. He gazed out from the helicopter at the land passing below. Moretti looked in the opposite direction. The waters of the Great Po River flowed through a riverbed oversized for its current volume. The poles that once marked its depth now stood far from the water, isolated in the dry ground, their white paint halfway up, faded and useless. The Parolis is pleased as well. She's already transferred everything to your account. Moretti turned. He saw his own face doubled and distorted in the colonel's lenses, his mouth stretched like elastic, perfectly mirroring his unease. He wanted to ask about the burn on the man's neck, but chose a different question. How did she manage to become the owner of all these companies if her father was a climate activist? When Umberto De Parolis realized that all his outreach would never lead to real results, he reacted by overturning his goals. He began buying shares in companies that would become centrals in the scenarios he foresaw, and waited for his predictions to come true. His daughter, with sharp business instincts and a fair amount of cynicism, took it further. She now controls the most important companies. In practice, she can influence political power simply by deciding to shut off one of her precious taps. Futures and derivatives would skyrocket. Gabriele couldn't reconcile the image of that woman with the power she held, like a sticker that wouldn't fit its frame. Hey, Moretti, look down there. Colonel Petrini pressed his face to the window. See that green strip? Down there, near that rusted tractor carcass? Yes, I see it. How can there be that single strip of vegetation in such barren land? Moretti understood immediately. That patch of grass, so sparse and localized, had to be caused by a leak from some clandestine pipe. All it took was a loose joint, a sequence of drops and condensation, and within weeks, some plant species would reclaim its right to exist. He looked at Colonel Petrini in dismay. The man was already on the phone with his operational team. Returning home would have to wait another night.
corazón con el mío. Anda muchacho a la casa y me trae la carabina, hijo. Amata ese gavilán que no me deja gallina, hijo. La luna me está mirando, yo no sé lo que me ve. Yo tengo la ropa limpia y el tarde la lavé. La luna me está mirando, yo no sé lo que me ve. Yo tengo la ropa limpia. Yo tengo la ropa limpia. Ayer tarde la lavé. Ayer tarde la lavé.
Sonia Villani. Say your name because I don't like
Melissa, Guardiola-Bijur. Matteo Rini.
Laura Caparrotti.
Adesso, are you ready for being very depressed?
Tanto buonasera, grazie. Parlo in italiano la prima, per l'opportunità. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I think it was really a privilege to listen to this piece and also to this artistic perspective about let's say climate change. And let me tell you that for me it's particularly moving because I'm strongly convinced, like there is a very famous paleanthropologist, Edgar Pringles, who said that creativity is the emergency modality of survival. So I'm not necessarily depressed, I'm optimistic today. Sergio also suggested, we remember, I was a little bit less optimistic, and you said, no, let's go, let's see the positive. So first I would like to introduce also our experts and guests here, Michela Biasutti. Michela Biasutti studies the dynamics of weather and climate in tropical and subtropical regions, the external forcing and internal mechanisms that have created droughts in the past and will create changes in seasonal and extreme rainfall in the future, and the impacts of climate change on society. At Columbia University since 2004, she currently holds the position of Lamont Research Professor at the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, and is a core faculty member in the Master of Arts program in Climate and Society at Columbia Climate School. Thank you very much, Michela, to be here with us. I also take the chance to introduce Sergio Castellari. Sergio is a senior climate scientist in the National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology in Bologna, Italy. Currently, he is the climate and environment expert at the permanent mission of Italy to the United Nations here in New York. He is an expert in climate adaptation at a European scale and in Italy. He was one of the two scientific contributors to the text of this theatrical reading. So you are here in double, both as a creative, as an artist, and as an expert. So you are like, yes, probably the person who bring together the two aspects, so the linear thinking and the creative thinking together. So, and I think that one of the reasons why creativity is important is because it's the place where we can bring all the dots, that science is bringing, is analyzing, but artists can develop some type of vision that goes beyond the linear thinking of science. One question for you, Laura. So how theater works towards sustainability and climate change? Do you have also examples of recent works that in a way represent these transformations?
Yes, it feels strange to speak after being, the introduction of these two very important people. So there is a big movement on theater, and theater, I will say green. For instance, there is in Europe especially, but also here. In Europe there is, for instance, the IETM, which is a platform for performing arts. And one of the focus, and it's Kairos Theater is part of this platform. Is based on Brussels, in Brussels, because of the European Union, is founded by the European Union, but is basically one of the major subject and one of the major theme, one of the major studies they do is how the I cannot say to the, okay, thank you, that word. And how we can try to work towards approaching theater, art, creativity through the lens of, helping the climate. For instance, one of the things, there is an annual meeting. Every year they ask all the members if they could, of course, to take the train and not to take the plane, or to take a bus and not to take the plane. So the little things, or the entire meeting is all with this. We don't use any more, plastic. So there is a few things that they do, and then they do this called the Green School, where they bring together artists and they understand how to work towards improving and make more art with recycled material in certain communities where there is very little development. So they're trying to also to bring together the communities. And also there is another, unfortunately, a festival that I was told that this year it ended. but it's called the Festa del Teatro Ecologico in Italy. It was in Stromboli. Do you know Stromboli? The Eolian. So they were doing the entire festival as a theater festival, site-specific, no using electricity at all. There was no use of electricity. So it's another way, how can I do art without the use of electricity? And one more, there are so many, I'm just giving you some. There is a theater company in Europe, but I heard also there is a show here in the States that uses the audience isn't seated in bicycle, and so generates electricity for the show. So these are little things, but there is another, the tank that maybe you have heard of, the tank in the theater here. Megan Finn, who is the director, she was just in Rome. We did a series of readings of theater, American theater in translation, and she brought a show. And we did one event like that because the University of Rome, Roma 3, wanted to do, they're doing a program on green theater. And so she was saying that the Tank, which is a theater on 36th Street, they basically are giving the theater from the morning to the evening. And one thing, because you have a space, like Casa Italiana, you use the energy, 24/7. So why don't use it instead of being empty, but you still have the electricity going? So you use the theater anyway. You have people entering the theater while the theater is anyway open because they have to, the electricity is running, the water is running, and so forth. And she's trying, together with other companies, to use spaces that are empty, that are sitting empty, to use them. So they are used, and you don't waste energy or electricity or anything. So there is a use of empty spaces instead of having all these empty spaces sitting there. There are, again, so many more, but there is really a movement towards trying to use our tools to work for our planet.
Yes, making the communication emerging in a stronger way. I like very much the consideration that you did that the reduction of resources in a way suggests that artists can invent new ways to express themselves. Sorry if I make a consideration of topic, but because it's like something that I love about New York. This reminds me the movement of hip hop in South Bronx. I've been told that this was exactly what happened. They had no resources, and they invented a completely new form of art, which was based on lack of resources, if you want. This is giving me the chance also to make the first question to Michela, which is also linked to also your studies. What I have the chance, the honor to speak to you another time, and what I find particularly significant in your research, also that your research is about climate, but also in the impact on society, on community, and this is exactly what you were saying. So that there is not such a thing like climate change in the cloud, and then there is a society. No, what is happening in these two when these two conditions meet? So how likely is the scenario of extreme aridity portrayed in the piece real from your point of view? Do you expect aridity to worsen everywhere in some way? That what we expect warming to occur everywhere? What is your perspective on the reality?
And we said positivity. Please
give us all hopes.
So, right. So the warming is something that we expect to happen pretty much everywhere, and more on land than over ocean, more in the high latitudes than in the low latitudes. But even then, if you think of the tropics, they warm up less in absolute term, but they also usually have a much less variability. So whatever heat is going to come is going to be unprecedented. Rain is more complicated. There were places that we expect will become wetter, like the high latitudes. The Mediterranean and Europe, we expect definitely will become drier. And there's some. And the aridity, though, is not just rainfall. It's not just how much water we get from the sky, but it's also how much water we lose from the land back into the air. And so, and that changes with temperature. So even in places where we don't expect rainfall to decline, we might expect more arid soils. There's a lot of research that is happening right now to figure out exactly how this hydrology will change, how much is impacted by the character of the rain, whether we're going to have more episodic, in the piece it's mentioned, right, the idea of more intense rainfall and yet more aridity, and that also is something that we expect to happen in the vast majority of places, this change of the rain from more moderate to more extreme. So the land would react differently to these different kinds of rain. And so we do expect a lot of substantial changes and a lot of a tendency towards aridity. But
where is the optimist?
Well, I think I don't see, 55 is not that far, right? I don't see the scenario that was portrayed here to be really the most likely for two reasons. One is that we have bent the curve. Mm-hmm. When I started, I came into this country in 96, and back in those days, the trajectories were going towards 5 degrees of warming. Mm-hmm. And even though we are not doing enough, we have bent the curve. And even though we're not where we should be, we're also not going towards the most extreme warming that was projected. And just like you can do theater without electricity, you can look back to, how did maybe the Greek were able to, project without a microphone. There is a lot of wisdom of how to collect rain and how to use it. And so, there's movement towards reclaiming that old knowledge and designing cities, designing agriculture so that we can do better with less. So I'm still hopeful.
Yeah, well, this is absolutely, as you rightly said, there is a hope here. And the hope is exactly what you said. You're making me think of the fact that in some area, by the way, in Iran, they are able to make the ice in the desert. So there is a knowledge there that we still can consider. This is the question. They explained to me. Actually, it's pretty difficult to explain, but okay. I promise. But it's impressive. There is a lot of knowledge that we lost simply because we have been used for such a long time to switch a machine and go there. Now we have to come back to this knowledge. And this knowledge has a lot to do with a concept which you are an expert about, which is adaptation. Which means even if the curve is bending, still something is going to change somehow in the environment, and adaptation probably is a key word here. So we know that you are expert in this field. So and also that you are an author of this. And this reading showed that in 2055, subject to severe climate impact, will have consequences in how we interpret the environment in the future. So can you explain to us what is adaptation and what it means to adapt to the impact of climate change in the future?
Okay, thanks, Alessandro. No, actually, actually, I didn't write the piece. Actually, just give me 1 minute. We were having dinner in my home in 2013 with my friend Carlo Cacciamani, And, Carlo and myself, in that time, I was also the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, focal point of Italy. So I was going to the TV, radio, going to a lot of conference. And we were thinking about how can we really create some emotion in the people, increasing the awareness, because the graphs, the histograms were not enough. So after a lot of wine, we decided why we don't call our friends from DAMS. DAMS was the first school created in Italy from Umberto Eco, which I think everybody knows. It was the Department of Art, Music and Show in Bologna, was the first one. So a lot of crazy, artistic, creative people came out. We had a friend, Marco Vignudelli, which actually wrote this piece. And we just provide, we are scientists, we're not good writers of novels, and we just provide some technical, scientific support, always meeting each other. And after a few months, we develop a theater piece with some actors, and then it became a theater reading. So just given that, so I want to give to Caesar what is Caesar.
Right.
And Marco wrote this.
My fault to say that.
No, sorry. No, I just want to be clear because it's important.
Yes,
Marco
absolutely.
is a good friend of mine, and actually we've been working and carrying around this piece also in Brussels in English. So about adaptation. Adaptation is one of the two ways to fight climate change. And adaptation means basically to try to prevent or to reduce actually the risk of climate change impacts. You can have impacts on agriculture, on water sector, on tourism, on food production, on transportation, on energy production, think about, yes. So we know from what actually we are already witnessing, we are going through that unfortunately some impacts are unavoidable. And we can explain this with science. Basically, there is already a commitment, global warming, and so we have these impacts which are going on. So we need to work with technology, with nature. So, for example, nature-based solution, using nature to preserve the nature and also to create a reduction of risk to climate change, like floodplain, for example, or increasing the urban floodplain in the city to make so more waterproof the city. So adaptation started, I can tell you because I lived through that. Adaptation was a new word. I remember in IPCC meeting Shanghai 2001 for the third assessment report, there was the first volume on adaptation. But adaptation was a new word. Everybody was talking about mitigation, which is essential, so reducing the emission of greenhouse gases, so try to eliminate, get rid of the causes of the climate change. But adaptation became very popular in Europe in 2005. The Commission, European Commission, wrote a paper winning the battle of climate change, and you realize that even if we were doing, hypothetically, which actually we have been seeing was not possible, to reduce the emission right away in few years, we were going to have impacts. Anyway, unavoidable. So we need to try to build resilience, the second word. So basically building something, try to make our human system and the environmental system resilient to the future impacts and to the present impacts. So adaptation started in Europe in 2005 with a couple of papers from the Commission, the first adaptation strategy in Europe in 2013, and the second one in 2021. So now it's part of what is called the European Climate Law. So there is a structure of law, and there is mitigation, adaptation, disaster risk reduction. So my expertise through all the European projects, which they were paying my collaborator to work on these topics, was to try to understand the best policy. So I passed from climate models. I had basically a similar background of Michela, but I decided to go step to basically make a jump to go to the policy sector and to try to develop, because it was new, the policy, how can you make a science-informed policy at the European scale? And so we were all basically climate scientists, starting from scratch in 2007, 2009, with the first European project. Here there is a colleague of mine, Alessandra. I work with her sister. She's an architect, and we have been working together on adaptation. And she's still working on adaptation. Instead, now I have a different job here in New York. So adaptation is a way to try also to, in the same way to reduce the risk, also to try to help to mitigate, to reduce also the emission. One example, the green building, the green roof. If you have a green roof, okay, you basically make cooler the temperature inside of the building, so basically you use less AC, so you use less electricity, so you use less energy, so you do mitigation in the case the energy is made with fossil fuels, okay? And at the same time, you also adapt to the warming, global warming, and so you make basically a better environment for that building. So natural-based solution, floodplain, try to make, to use basically, recuperate some part of land just before the city. And if you have a big flood coming because you have a strong rain, you make the flood going out in this floodplain just before the city, so not inside of the city. And this floodplain, when there is no flood, where there is not too much rain, is a normal, nice recreational park. So this is basically adaptation, which is complementary to mitigation.
Perhaps this consideration immediately leads to the following question for you, Michela, because adaptation means that we are in some form accepting a certain level of change. What is this change that we are accepting? You already said that probably in the past we were expecting even worse, more 5 degrees, but what are the expectations currently? So what is the level that, let's say, the benchmark that we are considering for adaptation, if you want?
So, the Paris Agreement was hoping for 1.5, but at least less than 2. The current policy, present madness in Washington notwithstanding, is still going towards 2.5, 3 degrees. But that's coming from just the energy revolution. There's various, the choices that we're making, though, are still capable of changing that curve. And so right now, any climate policy is gonna change and bend that curve down towards 2.5 to maybe 1.5 is out of reach right now, but every tenth of a degree matters. So there's nothing particularly magical about 1.5 or 2, right? Nature doesn't think in Celsius, and so every amount of warming we avoid matters for impacts and for our well-being. And the important thing that I think we've learned in the last decade, though, is that we have allies in the natural world. So in both the ocean and in the vegetation over land, they already are taking half of the carbon that we put in the atmosphere, they take it out, right? And so this dance that happens between the atmosphere, the land, and the ocean is such that if we were to stop emissions now, the warming would stop because carbon dioxide would start going down. And so we would be able to stop the warming. Not everything would stop with it, right? The ice that we have in Greenland and Antarctica and the Alps, that's not happy in a warmer climate. That will continue to melt, and the ocean will continue to warm up, and so sea level rise is still going to go up. But a lot of the effects that we're talking about in this piece, for example, the changing of the character of the rain, as I said, having more extreme rainfall, that would stop with the warming. So the way I think about it is in terms of commitments right now is more in terms of our own choices. Are we making a commitment to building more fossil fuel plants, or are we making a commitment to changing the energy infrastructure towards something different and changing maybe habits and minds as well? But, again, I want to, from the point of view of the natural system, there's a lot that can happen. So we were not committed to more warming. It's just what we are choosing to do.
Yes, this is, if I can make a metaphor, it's very difficult for those who are not experts to understand that global warming is not something like a switch of the car that you on off. It's more like a boat. Even if you stop at a certain moment, there are some inertia that is working in some direction, and this is what you described. So there are things that we have to consider in this context. And also you highlighted how there is, of course, the role of politics in this context. And this is for you, the question is for you regarding, let's say, the politics, so the geographical understanding of what climate change is, because I'm aware that you coordinated the project that prepared the Italian climate change adaptation strategy. You already mentioned about a decade ago, and before arriving to New York, you have been also working on several European projects as an Italian scientist and as a European Union expert. So, from your perspective, how well equipped are Europe and particularly Italy, I would say, regarding climate change adaptation?
Okay, so this is a very good question because I am from Europe, the Europe 27, I'm from Italy, G7 country. So we are rich countries, we are developed countries, but actually I worked for 6 years in the European Environment Agency in Copenhagen. So, and my ex-colleague developed and published a very important volume in March 2 years ago, which is the first climate risk assessment of Europe, based on 36 indicators. And basically the key message from this report, which will be remade in a few years, in 2028 if I'm correct, show that Europe, with all the science and knowledge, with all the technology, with all the solution, we're going very slowly with adaptation. The impacts of climate change, they are going faster than the policy and than the measures in Europe. And another study from my ex-colleague from Euro-Mediterranean Center on Climate Change, they work for DG Climate and DG ENV in European Commission, and this year, in January, yes, they published a study which basically they try to estimate how much investment are needed. So they've been working climate scientists with economists all together, and basically the big result was that you need at least 70 billion of euro every year to adapt to the key impacts, especially in energy, in transport, and in food production. So Europe is doing a lot in adaptation, but we need to do more and faster. And for example, there are three key words in the adaptation strategy of European Union 2021. Smarter adaptation means more knowledge, more research, more science, more data. Then systemic adaptation means try to introduce the concept of risk reduction in each policy sector, in each sector also of socioeconomic sector, and also to be fast. So this is the third keyword from 2021, and this first risk assessment, done very, very well with all the indicators, show that what European Union plan with the second adaptation strategy in 2021 is doing, but too slow. So your question is good for this reason, that even 27 developed countries, which they're doing a lot on resilience, still they need to do more. Why? And this is another key concept. Europe is the fastest warming continent in the world. So the global average trend of temperature is like we are now around 1.5. Europe, all the European land, is warming around 2 degrees. So we are warming in Europe. I say we are because I consider myself European. In my own country, in Europe, we are warming faster and higher than the rest, the global average. So for this reason, I think this gives you the big challenge that not only we have the vulnerable countries, the SIDS, the small island state, we have the African country. So this is basically means that the only way to solve the climate model is to increase the interaction among countries, to increase the cooperation, which should be scientific, technological. We need to work all together because actually the impacts in south of Europe, they don't stop to Pantelleria Island. They go to North Africa also. For this reason, there are many Mediterranean projects. Now the Mediterranean is becoming like a lab, a very important lab for climate science and climate policy.
May I ask a question?
Yes,
and if you have any question, let us know. So I have two questions. One is, in Copenhagen, they have this beautiful play, the recycling of the garbage. And I know they have a theater that takes the energy from the audience and uses the energy for the electricity of the theater. Why only in Copenhagen and not, I don't want to say in Rome, but not even in New York? I mean, why only in Copenhagen? No.
But in Italy, yes.
I cannot
in
answer
Italy, yes, where?
this question.
The town of Peccioli has one of the
Peccioli?
most... Peccioli in Tuscany. It's a model city. Sorry, it's not well known, but they produce biogas from landfill. Is a unique model in the world.
So my serious question, no. But my serious question is why only few places?
It's the right question.
And not, why is not a regular thing that we see? Is because it's too expensive, or is because the countries they decided not to do it because they have other interests? So why they don't follow? All the countries have this thing.
I try to answer very fast. So as Alessandro mentioned, in 2012 and 2013 and 14, I coordinated the project for the Ministry of Environment of Italy to organize, to create the Italian strategy of adaptation. So that was the strategy. Now we have a plan. Working on adaptation, unfortunately, is very slow. And for this reason, we need to be fast because you have, for example, to build up, to make a city resilient to floods, but also to droughts. It takes time, not only money. For sure, all the money you invest is a good investment. It's not a cost. It's a strategic investment because you waste more money with the damage. Why Copenhagen did that? Because in 2011, there was a cloud burst, which they had water, 1 meter of water in the building where I went to work after a few years, in the main square, Kongens Nytorv, the main square of Copenhagen. And they got around a little bit less than 1 billion euro of damage. So they thought about, it's going to take us maybe 10 years, 8 years, but we need to make our city different in order not to have another damage of this, otherwise we're going to be broken. So they start to work on the city. This is happening also in other cities. Milano is working on that. Bologna is working on that. Roma now, there is, I heard from some colleagues that also they're starting to move. But the problem is, no, I tell you what is the problem. It's very simple. Roman Empire. Culture. Our city, because I work on this before going to Copenhagen, making resilient Siena or Florence or Bologna or Roma, which is a huge, beautiful town, is more difficult than making resilient a small or even an average city in North Europe. Why? Because we have antiquities everywhere. So you need to preserve the antiquities, but you need to make a resilient old environment. And keeping also some green, because if you think about history, the Middle Age, basically where there were the gardens? In the palace of the rich people. There was no public parks in the Middle Age in the city. The city was to protect people, to make business, to make money, and to make living well the rich people, and the rest of the people, they were also trying to survive and to live. Now, this city, which are beautiful, now they need to be resilient. Why? Because we're going to have heat waves. Heat waves are going to increase also the pollution. It's going to increase the erosion. It's going to create a lot of problems. To make a resilient, beautiful city like Bologna, Siena, Florence, or Roma, which is like 10 times than Siena, for sure is more challenging than making better, I don't know, Bristol or Manchester or Copenhagen also. Okay. So our challenge is even higher. For this reason, We are working in Italy on that, but it's going to take a little bit more time. We hope, so for this reason we are optimistic that we started. We hope we are not going to get too many impacts in the way in order to be resilient at the right moment.
I have more questions, but I want to open. Possiamo avere, can we have just a little bit more light on the audience? Un pochino di luce, grazie. Yes, vai. Chi è che c'ha una domanda? Domande? No? Siete depressi tutti.
We've been trying to be positive. We've been trying to be positive, no?
I have a question.
Okay, please.
Hi. Maybe I'm wrong, but I really believe that all these effort that we are trying to do in Europe, in US, and other few countries in the world are really important to prevent and bring awareness on the problem of climate change. On the other hand, I believe there are other countries who really are not pushing this kind of development, awareness, and how this could really impact. So the fact that there are countries who are much more prone to preserve environment and others who basically don't care.
Yes. By the way, this is also because beside everything, you are also right. There is important that the politics and policy, especially the city in Copenhagen, just want to give credit. What you said is a unique context. So I'm just
not considering only Europe or US.
No, exactly. I mean, there are politics that.
But I'll comment on you because my second question was in Calabria, which is I'm half Calabrese, as many of you know. We had hurricanes. We never had hurricanes like this year, and because they built where they were not supposed to build, there was so much damage everywhere. I was scared that my house was gone, but there are some towns that are completely isolated because the hill came down. And it's only because they built where they were not supposed to build, so they cut the trees. They made it in a way that is a mess, and it's been like 3 months of mess. And I don't know if they're going to recuperate for the summer, for instance, for the tourist season. So, yeah. And you can...
Very briefly, yes. Unfortunately, risk depends on 3 main factors. The hazard, so basically the flood in this case, disposal, so how many assets, how many infrastructure, how many people live in that area, and the third one, which you mentioned, basically, the vulnerability. So how much that area is vulnerable. For example, if you build where you are not supposed to build, just in front of a river with nothing else, for sure you are very vulnerable. Plus, if you build a lot in a very expensive home, so even an hospital, you increase disposal. So if you get another higher than the average, like in Sicily and Calabria, you get these 3 factors increasing a lot. So equal risk, a huge risk. So for this reason, you need adaptation. You need now to start. So in some area of Europe, it's very difficult to make what is called transformative adaptation, so to move people far away. They only did in few countries in Europe, in North Europe, but I don't think we cannot do in Italy. What we need to do is start to protect this area which they've been built in a very wrong place, or maybe trying to move some of them in a better place. But you need to do. And this needs a joint knowledge between architects, engineering, climate scientists, economists, sociologists, and even psychologists, because they need to convince these people that there is a problem. If they don't want to get through the same problem, they need to start to think about a change, a transformation. So you need psychology. No, believe me, it's a very interesting process.
And you need to push the politicians, though.
Sure.
Because have you heard what happened in Nishemi? Was I right?
Yeah. Nishemi, yes.
In Nishemi. So
yes.
there is a town on a hill. It was not supposed to be there, and now it's coming down. And many people are losing their houses. But also, I think the European Union gave €9 million, And these 9 millions, the administration of the city at the time decided not to invest it into make it the town safer, but to something else. The people at the time didn't say anything. Maybe they didn't know. And now half of the town has lost their houses. Beautiful houses. There were some people like my new house. So
For this reason, you need this kind of communication like the Margherita di Adele, because I think this way
Absolutely.
to work with theater and not with histogram, graphs, equation. We are boring sometimes as a scientist. We need we are boring. We need to do more. We have to use more soft skills, because we get our job paid for sure. We publish, we do our job, but we work for the society. And so if we use all this theater, any other kind of communication, even music, dancing, maybe 20 years ago, many people in that small town in Sicily, they were going to be aware about this problem. They were going to push stronger the politicians. I don't know, maybe I'm a dreamer, but I strongly believe the older I become, the communication is key for science. And also another thing which you made me think about at the beginning is traditional knowledge. Indigenous knowledge. So the knowledge that we have from the past. There are, maybe not in Europe always, but especially in Africa, in Asia, there are many knowledge from the old civilization, which they've been there, they know how to understand, how to deal with droughts, how to deal with floods. And all this knowledge now is getting lost. So if you make this knowledge valuable, using also science, from Galileo Galilei, the scientific method, altogether, maybe we can do something better. So you see, I'm very positive.
Yes, please. We use the mic because we are recording. This is why we need the mic.
Thank you, and thank you for this extremely interesting conversation, and also for delighting us with your art before. So I'm very interested in the part of the knowledge that exists in traditional communities, right? Because I do think that together with adaptation and using current findings of science is perhaps the answer, right? But I mean, how can, from a governance point of view, ensure that this knowledge is in fact used in regulating the way we make new developments in terms of engineering and architecture, the way we provide or deny concessions? I'm thinking about, for example, a marvelous book that I read, Is the River Alive?, that explains, in fact, how the interventions in certain countries, including Latin American countries, Ecuador, for example, but I mean, it's in fact different areas of the world, has increasingly exhausted all forms of water, and indigenous communities are fully aware of it and have tried to prevent. In fact, for example, in Ecuador, there was the movement that gave a juridic person to nature because of it, and yet we don't seem to be able to influence governance, right, and to leverage this knowledge of indigenous communities. So what else can be done? I agree that art is a marvelous way of moving people, but why can't we have it at an higher level?
So I think I'm going to get to both of you in the sense that you're asking how do we govern a problem that is a global problem, but with a lot of decision makers, right? And you're claiming that some countries don't care. I don't know that that's true, in the sense that Europe has a lot of good intention, but also has moved a lot of the manufacturing outside of Europe. So if you do the whole accounting, we don't look that good. and there's an issue of historical responsibility besides, so that all the climate change happens as a response to the accumulated carbon dioxide. So there's stories there, but some, like China right now, right, pollutes more than even the United States. On the other hand, China is also leading now in the energy revolution. So it's not a good and bad, right? And the reason why China can act more quickly in developing these new technologies and especially not just developing, but getting them deployed at scale is because they don't have to deal with, again, a whole lot of people having different ideas of how to solve this problem that is right in front of us now, as opposed to the long-term planning. And so in the United States, it's been a lot more difficult to, for example, change the grid, right? Then because you need to have all the municipalities and all the states and all, and so unfortunately there's no shortcut. This is, as a blogger that I really like, puts it, this is not a diploma problem, that you learn how to do it, you do it once, you do it correctly, and then you're done, right? That's what when you graduate high school, you do it, you're done. This is a toothbrushing problem. You're going to have to do it every day, twice a day for the rest of your life. And so if you figure out a way to make electricity in a cleaner way, you're still going to have to figure out, how much do we use? How much land do we use? This is not going to be something that we solve once and for all. This is going to be a continuous adjustment in how we design communities and cities and governance in a way that balances individual rights and the ability to come to a decision together, not by fiat, with the need for smart, fast, and diffused adaptation, mitigation, and action. It's a wicked problem.
And so, what can we do? We, here. Vote.
Yeah.
That is, right? I appreciate the recycling. I appreciate taking the train. But COVID was a 5% decline in global emission. When we all stayed home, it was a 5% reduction. We need that and more than that year after year after year. So we need to be smarter because there's only so much staying at home that people can do. So we need to be smarter. And to be smarter, we need people who have a vision and with a vision that looks forward as opposed to the 1950s. And I'm going to leave it at that.
I have a question about this. For you, for both of you. But first, I want to share a small experience because it's exactly the photograph. I think that what you just said: vote and be committed to understand who are the politicians who have a vision. I will not tell the city. I was doing a project for I was in a city in Italy, by the way, so not here, for a model district that was inspired by this principle. So it's possible. So guidelines, everything. Everything was going well. 2008, the economic crisis, we know. So I had a conversation with the mayor. He calls me and he tells me, Alessandro, unfortunately, we cannot go ahead with the project because we have to cut funds, etc. And I said, I understand. You have to stop with all the initiative now. And he said, no, actually, we do one thing. I say, what are you going to do? Well, we are going to do the motorway bypass. And I said, sorry, but this doesn't make any sense. We were talking about politics. And said, the answer he gave me was, Alessandro, yes, but your project is visionary, but in 1 year they are going to vote And he told me that people are going to vote on this, not on the vision. So I was depressed. But I mean, sorry to go off topic, but it's my small opinion answer to the question. So that it's exactly what Michela said. There is a politician level, and we need to be very careful as citizens to.
And so more than vote, of course, but get involved.
Yeah.
Really ask the question, read what each candidate, the people who are leading are really doing and are really thinking and are really proposing. Because, for instance, in Calabria, but, they build stuff. My father was an engineer. He was, and every time we were going to the town, he was telling me, that is illegal, that is illegal, that is illegal, that is illegal. Now they're crying. But we don't have water in Calabria, not because there's no water. There is water, but we don't know where the water goes. It doesn't go to the right places. They just discovered that part of the town where I'm from, a little part, is not connected to sewage. 2026.
And we are talking about artificial intelligence.
So you understand how deep is the problem, and these people, I don't even think that some politicians understand what we are talking about. If they were here, they would be.
Well,
sorry.
if I can, this is about what I wanted to ask you both, because there is on one side. Yes, exactly. I have just one question, because we were saying science is not, but actually it's very cool, particularly now at one point, because everybody is excited by the opportunities that we have with artificial intelligence different ways. So I was wondering if there are any news, positive or negative, regarding the integration of artificial intelligence in understanding the models for prediction in climate analysis. If something is happening, if it's something positive, it's just curiosity.
Well, there's been huge advancement in weather prediction coming out of AI, because the weather is just looking out a few days, and so we have very, very good data to train these models on. For climate change, there's ways of including AI and the big data that is out there from satellite, et cetera, to help build a climate model. But the climate model has a different job. It has to predict something that we have never experienced, that we have never seen. And so the interface there is trickier. But yeah, there is a lot of research that is going on, trying to merge a physics-based modeling of the climate with understanding the single process, the creation of clouds or the interaction of radiation and molecules in the air, et cetera, from with the use of AI from big data. So yeah, a lot is brewing.
I agree with that. Yes, it's ongoing research on climate models using the AI. Yes.
Sergio, your final comments, let's say optimistic message that you want to give to the values. You're wrapping up.
Okay. Let me think about. No, I try to recap. Yes. Okay. Yes. I study physics in the 80 in Bologna, so I love Karl Popper. So I remember this phrase: "Optimism is a duty." Karl Popper was a philosopher, was an epistemologist. People from my generation, they study all these kind of strange people, in the free time, actually. And so why optimism is a duty? Because we work on science or on science-informed policy. So we work for the future. So you are stupid if you are not optimist on the future. So you have to be optimist. Second message, this is basically, the more I work in policy, the more I understand the value of science. So make science great again.